2, 3, testing. Is that okay, Dan? Yeah, Dan?
Some of the biggest publishers in the world, I think it's fair to say. He works in layout. He sources illustrators from all over the world to suit kind of various projects that he's working on, and he's going to talk about his journey on how he arrived at this stage today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I think I'm mic'd up. So, Craig, is it just left and right? Hi, everybody. Thank you for allowing me to do this talk. Somebody might already recognize me. I actually teach here on the degree course sometimes as well. And I feel a bit from the presentation that we just seen. It was Susan's presentation was really, a deep kind of all about art and quite a deep kind of meaningful conversation. Now we're going from that to like somebody who's like who started off as a bit of a jobbing illustrator, designer, and basically I'm just going to like show you my journey from art student and my kind of interest in drawing and how that led to a career working for one of the biggest publishers in the world at the moment and creating some quite high quality books along the process. So a little bit about myself. I kind of grew up in the 70s and 80s in England from a Pakistani family who were not really big on the idea of like art in general, and one of my first experiences growing up in school was I loved reading books, and mainly in those days it was these little ladybird books that you've got, and they were illustrated with beautiful illustrations and quite simple text, and I wanted like to kind of emulate those. So I'd done some drawings. I showed my teacher. She goes, "Oh, you've got some kind of like talent, and you can draw really well. So maybe you should use that and speak to your parents about maybe choosing a career in art." And it was quite young days, and I didn't even think about it. But my parents were really against the idea. Like obviously, an Asian kind of background, they were more interested in kind of more academic subjects, I guess, at the time, in kind of accountant or a doctor or a lawyer. It's a traditional. Well, I guess it's quite a cliche kind of thing now. But I said, look, I just want to do art and things. So luckily I studied art, and then eventually I studied at Cambridge School of Art at the time, and I'm just going to show you. And this is just one of the last slides I've got from when I graduated, actually. And I created this. It was like a for my final major project. I created this book on different types of hats, and I liked black and white ink drawings. So I've done loads of black and white ink drawings based on Heath Robinson's hats, and it was a children's book in the end. And this was one that was selected. I put into a competition just before I graduated, and it was in the Artists and Illustrators magazine, and it ended up being being chosen to represent the art school, and also it was chosen in the Association of Illustrators magazine, and that got me a little bit of publicity, which when you just graduate is quite an important thing. So yeah, and then that it's the final major project, and that kind of made me get a bit more confident about what I can do, and at the same time applied to St. Martin's to study graphic communication, of course, as an MA is what it was in those days. But I think the main thing I just loved to do was drawing, and drawing mainly in sketchbooks. And when I was at St. Martin's, one of the first things I just used to always do was have a sketchbook and draw, and then I started coming up with my own project. This was a project I came up with an idea of I quite like historical figures, and I do these drawings in my sketchbook about all these famous people throughout history. And when I was talking to my lecturer at the time, I said, oh, this is like quite a good idea. Maybe you should speak to somebody and try and see if you can get some of this work published. And I said, I wouldn't even know where to start. So he goes, look, just try and send your work out. And in those days, it wasn't email. This was talking about the late 90s. So I ended up sending some samples to a few people I thought might be interested in. And one of the people I sent them to was, I found out who the head of Amnesty at that time was. Amnesty was a guy called Dan Jones. And he said, oh, he quite liked the drawing, so he wanted to meet up. And we had this big discussion. He said, oh, maybe these could work as like a poster. So I created worked alongside, but I didn't know anything about putting anything together. He said, if you put something together as a piece of design, we can kind of like create maybe like a poster or something out of it. So I worked with somebody at the time who was a graphic designer at St. Martin's, and he came up with like a few more drawings and a few more characters. And he said he would it might work as a big poster. And this is working with a graphic designer, and come up with this big A1 size poster, and it had to be quite bright, quite colourful, and really kind of like something big. They wanted to use it as a poster in schools, but the guy really liked this idea and said, actually, this could work as a book. So in the end, I worked with a designer, and Andrew just kind of gave me a hand, and it ended up being like this big, like a big children's book type poster, which goes around like a school classroom. So I'll just give you an idea of how big it was in the end. So it just folds out. So in the end, you can see from just going to like an A1 poster, it ended up being this big book. And like as a student at the time, to get something just created just by meeting a few people and showing them my drawings, I thought, hold on, there is a way you can actually make a living out of being an illustrator and a designer. But again, it was just purely the illustration which I was doing, and just again, just because I loved drawing and mainly using pen and ink. I got one of my first commissions for Amnesty, and then I built up a relationship with Dan Jones at Amnesty, and so that's just a close-up of the picture and things. And then then there was a few other projects that he was doing at the same time. One of them was it was 50 years of human rights, and he asked me to do a logo which represents Amnesty dealing with prisoners of conscience, political prisoners. So they had this idea, and he said, oh, well, this is really good, and we use this in a lot of their corporate identity, and I think it's probably around about 72 years now. And he liked this idea of this dove as well, and he said maybe you can create some more kind of like ideas around this idea of like, of this peace dove almost, but I quite like this dove, and he asked me to like add in colour, and this was used as their Christmas card for that year. And basically, it was just, even though I was studying at the time, I was actually physically going out there, meeting people, trying to get commissions, as well as my studying at the same time. So it just gives you an idea of while you're studying, don't be afraid to go out there and look for work. And what's next on this? Oops, sorry. And this was another book which I worked on. Again, just going out there and meeting people and saying, like, this is what I do. This small, so just like a small book that I've done about somebody who kind of like grew up. Like loads of people have ideas about books, and it was end up being like just like a small illustrated book for like a small niche publisher. And again, like these are just literally drawings, pen and ink drawings that I've done around it. Somebody grew up in a kind of like in the Guinness Foundation house in Chelsea, and they wanted just to show their gratitude to this, commissioned me to go around and kind of doing these illustrations of how they used to live in the 1940s, and even before that, like then the 20s and 30s. So it's quite historical drawings again, just pen and ink drawings. I think the only real thing I had going for me at the time was I could always just draw really well. So I ended up just going around, moving down from Cambridge to London, and just getting this commission, being able to draw in my sketchbook. Really, that was the main thing that really kind of like that kept me going. And they're quite, they're quite figurative in style as well. So and again, just black and white, which I took to the and then they wanted to make some posters as well and enlarge a lot of these for a lot of their publicity. So some of them I just coloured in by hand. But remember, like this is, Photoshop as well was around along with Illustrator as well. But just traditional pen and ink and just using a colour photocopier again, which I like to use as well. And sorry, it just seems to be bits kind of like. But I'll press it over here. Okay, sorry, yeah, sorry. So yeah, so these are some more kind of like drawings from the. I always liked figurative drawing, and also kind of like a little bit of like historical stuff. So this was my two kind of passions at the same time. I was studying illustration and also getting these kind of like commissions and just going out there and meeting people and talking to people, and saying, look, this is like what I do. And I think I'd made it quite clear that I wanted to actually, instead of like studying and getting a part-time job, like stacking shelves and saying, which is nothing wrong with that. I just thought I want to go out there and try and actually make a living of what I want to do. And I think that was, it's quite an important step, because socially, I think as an illustrator, you're always like you're enclosed, and it's quite difficult in terms of like communication as well to kind of, and I was also like, I was also quite shy and quite introverted. So going out there, meeting these kind of like agencies and trying to get work, and then a lot of the time it was most of the time, in fact, it was about rejection, like saying, oh, we like your work, but there's no work available at the time being. But once you got one commission, it slowly does help to actually snowball other work coming through, and then again, like I coloured up quite a lot of them. And yeah, so from this simple style, I ended up getting quite a lot of work, and it started actually affecting my studies, because most of the time I was doing commissioned work when I should have been at college and studying. And then I think, yeah, this was another book that I illustrated for Christmas books at the time. Is again pen and ink drawings of the gold-struck cauldron. It's a Celtic cauldron which they found in a museum, in a museum in Copenhagen at the moment. So I managed to go out, and in those days, I think illustrators, like, had a bit of respect to who actually went out there in the museum, and I just ended up doing drawings and then doing pen and ink drawings when I was there, and then kind of like converting them later on. And then there's a few here as well, just of the actual pen and ink drawings which I had done. Oops, sorry, no. Yep. Okay, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, that seems to be better. And then from these drawings, I just ended up again, as I said, like I was physically going out there, going and meeting people, and sometimes those people, they didn't necessarily work in book publishing; they worked in different kind of like areas and sectors. And one of the people I met at the time, we worked for this big advertising company, and they specialised in TV commercials. So I just explained to him the kind of like I was a student and I was looking for work, and he goes, "Oh, well, like what have you got work-wise?" So I just showed him some of my black and white sketchbook drawings, and he said, "Oh, I like this idea." He goes, "Do you want to do like a short work with us to create this short animated film for this?" It was a big showreel that they'd done, and it was part of I think I didn't realize at the time it was part of Saatchi and Saatchi, and they'd done all these huge TV commercials, went all around the world. And I said, like, he vaguely had this commission, but he didn't have a brief at all. All he said to me was in a meeting when he was having a coffee one day, he was saying, "I've got this idea of this spiral, and somebody worked up this spiral, and there's a human type person who's just growing and lights growing," and that's all he said. So I just had to go away, done all these weird kind of drawings, and I think there's a medical term based on, I think this based on kind of like the actual senses and how big they would be in reality compared to, it was like, so that's what he told me anyway. So I went off and done a bit of research on this, done the spiral idea, and he really liked this spiral idea. He goes, this really works really well. And he said this idea of somebody going up and these new directors who direct TV commercials are being helped up this big spiral. And yeah, and then like I just done some more ideas, and he really liked this kind of idea of this man with lights glowing on and off in these. And in the end, like they ended up saying I was going to illustrate the actual kind of like step-by-step illustration, but because it was only like a short 3-minute kind of like segment, it would be quite a lot of work. So I done some of the roughs, and again, I took some of my drawings and used them in Adobe Photoshop, colorizing them, and tried to do some small like kind of GIF animation, and they worked really well. And but he said, look, this is actually quite interesting. So he wanted to develop it further, and then he used like a big kind of post-production company in Soho, Rushes, and they ended up creating this. I haven't got the actual like showreel itself. Well, I do have it somewhere, but in this case of like kind of like finding it. This is quite a long time ago. So it ends up like this man with all lights on walking up this spiral, and it kind of like as it moves on, it kind of transpires instead of walking up to the top of the spiral, he's actually walking to the bottom because he's got some kind of help here. It was like a new director's title sequence. So, which is great for me because I've got loads of like kind of like commissions, and I've done something like which I was a bit out of my comfort zone as well. And then even though I was like kind of studying at the time, my lecturer at the time was saying, look, you know, you really have to start considering, you know, what you're studying really, rather than going out. But in the end, it did actually kind of pay my budget to actually get me through college in the first place. And then I was just concentrating on my studies. And when I was at Martin, I really liked this idea of like getting interested in typography and creating my own books. And also I always liked fables and fairy tales. So this was a kind of like book that I wanted to do, but I didn't know anything about typography. I just knew about how to draw, really. So I thought, why don't I just draw the type and the typography? And again, like, so I'd got this kind of like small budget where I just brought loads of old papers. I know, like, art equipment is, we've placed a lot of the works, and you know, it's quite a lot of. It's easy to get hold of art equipment, but you have to remember, like, sometimes when you're studying going to the London Graphic Centre, you've got a budget of £20 like to get your papers and things, whereas like you can walk down the Charing Cross Road at the time, there's loads of old bookshop, and they just used to have old books, and then you can just take them for free. So I used loads of, I've got boxes and boxes of old books and old papers, and just started experimenting really. And then that as Martin's lecture was actually, I think this is a bit more kind of experimentation that you should try and do when you're at college, rather than focus on getting paid work. So in the end, I ended up kind of like having the best of both worlds, having a bit of paid work on the side, which was kind of helped me with my finances, and also kind of working and creating some of the actual stuff for my final major project and degree show during the MA. And yeah, so you get like the kind of idea. They were just ended up selling these original artworks. Actually, later on, I did an exhibition of these artworks, and I sold a lot of these kind of original pieces. I don't have the original pieces anymore, but I still have the right to actually copy them, which is one thing to bear in mind as well. And again, they're just all old papers, and created like just like a red and black biro, and just pens and pencils I had lying around. And then I really love this idea of like creating my own books, and publishing is what I really wanted to get into. I looked at different areas of what, instead of working in advertising or graphic design, I really wanted to get into publishing. So again, you know, I wasn't a great typographer. I didn't know about type, but I know if you want to create books, you have to. There's a relationship between the type and the image, so it's something to bear in mind. And I just experimented cutting out old type using like pens and just seeing what typefaces are really. And there's a few kind of like different examples. And yeah, so I left left art college with this kind of idea. I wanted to somehow combine the text and the image to create kind of artworks, and also maybe if I can, like work in publishing. Really, that was the kind of idea to try and break into that. So just, like, again, just experimented creating my own books. And yeah, so there's loads of these old, and I love old fairy tales. It's kind of what I grew up with, you know, years ago, and what I kind of grew up with, and the kind of area I want to go into. And again, like, I think as a designer and illustrator, you have to be really interested in the text and the image and the relationship. So these are some more, again, like, you know, very kind of similar kind of artworks. But again, this is what made up the bulk of my portfolio when I left college at the time. It just gives you, like, again, just really old papers, but and just placing them and just experimenting, messing around, and just having fun with, you know, not being working to a brief for financial gain, really. And then, so basically, I left art college, and one of the first kind of like jobs I got was working for Dorling Kindersley at the time, which is a big publishing house, and they just wanted somebody to go in and illustrate. They do these huge kind of reference books. They wanted somebody who could just kind of illustrate these objects, but then they wanted somebody who knew how to do them in Illustrator. And I hadn't that clue what Illustrator was, I didn't even realize. It was like one of those Adobe programs. And they said, and then when I went and had my meeting, he said, I really like your drawings. And he goes, well, can you do these in Illustrator? I said, yeah, of course I know. I know how to use Illustrator. And which I didn't actually. And the first day I went into, they didn't actually, even though I was working freelance, I had to go into the offices and explain how to work this stuff. But I think it is something when it comes to software, you can learn, you can develop, as long as you've got the basics of the actual idea and to draw. So in the end, I just learned how to use Illustrator myself. I bought a computer with the money I'd got from when I was working freelance on all those projects, and learned how to use Photoshop and Illustrator. And there's another program at the time called Quark, and just started drawing these. And these are all kind of like published work in these specific scientific books. And there were hundreds of them, really. But I mean, it was what I wanted to do, and it was, to be honest, it was a bit different working like with hand pencils, pen and ink, and then moving on to the kind of like computerized work. And again, there were hundreds of them, like, or thousands, I guess, on different types of books. Some books showed you, you know, they do these kind of self-help books, or explaining how to create work with needlework. And again, my job was just to use people's hands, draw them, and illustrate them. All these books were published, and then from there, because I was working and creating the artworks and the illustrations, and I knew how to use the software, and because I knew how typography works in a spread, I started coming up with doing like not only just the actual design, the illustration, the rough kind of ideas, but also putting everything together, and working as a packager for for small publishers. And this was something I worked on with another small packager at the time, or book publisher. And again, like just kind of like having to think about the layout, the design. I know this is the finished kind of artwork, but it always starts off as a rough drawing in my sketchbook, and then I would like draw it up and then see whether the design's going to work in layout. And then so these are some more spreads from the book. I'm just going to like zap through these. Oops. And then from those other jobs, I got my next job was working again with Dorling Kindersley, but this time it was with their travel guides. So they do these big kind of travel guides for all around the world, DK travel guides, and a lot of these artworks, were kind of quite high detailed illustrations. And with these, I actually got to go to the Doge's Palace in Venice and actually have a look at the scale and do some rough kind of ideas about how they had these things created. And Dorling Kindersley always liked these cutaways. And so again, there were hundreds of these, but quite big project, which took months on end to actually illustrate, kind of like commission and work with like 3 or 4 different illustrators, working with editors as well at the same time. And from these, at the time, Apple had just brought out the new iPad, so they wanted to develop these and create these as interactive iBooks for Apple. And so I ended up working and creating these. So they could zoom in, and I used to commission a lot of the photography for these as well on location. And then it's this interactive thing that you just flip around on an iPad, and it's explaining how it goes if you want to zoom in to a certain area, and what you would see in that specific area. So I got to like learn a bit of new technology as well about how to create these interactive iBooks for Apple, and that was like in the end it was quite a few years' work, and this is only one example, but there were again like hundreds of these kind of and it was really good fun just to like have this bit of interaction as well. And again, like the basic was always kind of like drawn, and then how each spread would look, and then it goes back, and then I think the good thing about working in publishing is like each kind of like 6 months to a year you work on one project, and then you just move on to something totally different. So I worked on kind of like children's books, illustrating like scientific books. And then I've got some work on a new title, which is it's about climate change. So from one day to the next, you are working on a different, so to say, it looks like you're actually doing a new job actually. So it never gets boring or tired because you're just doing something new. You finish one project and you move on to the next. And this is a book I worked on with again with DK and this about climate change. And you know, for these book briefs, sometimes they just want you to come up with ideas, and a lot of it's to do with could be photography, could be infographics, and how do you pass this information on? And it's all about information and how that information is actually kind of like shown, and how you can learn from it just by having a quick look at it. So this, you know, just explains using like, you know, a big bit of typography, and then getting smaller and smaller within different levels and layers. So, and then like, you know, it'd be like a really important, like a big quote from somebody within the industry, like, you know, so David Attenborough. So you'd have to kind of like show this, and don't, it has to be look busy, but at the same time, you know, you get these little kind of drawn elements, a lot of white space, a lot of color. So again, like, this is the final product, but it would start off as a rough kind of like drawing in a just on a piece of paper. And then these are some other spreads from that gives a look of the book, and then what we're trying to like achieve from the actual book itself. And then there was a few other ones at the time being. This was another one I worked with at the same time as doing this book. I was actually working with another book with Pearson, and this was the kind of dry prediction, which is an ICC international climate change. So you can see what the actual kind of like size of the book and the information, how big they are. Remember, like, you know, it's not just one page you're working on a whole book, hundreds of pages, and a lot of text, a lot of typography. So and you're working as part of a big team as well. So you just have to be aware of, like, you know, other designers and how they're going to approach it. So there needs to be a seamless sense of style, you know, and that's given through the actual imagery and the actual typeface and the you know, and the style sheets which are used on the actual document. And then, so when I was talking about working on different books and working different titles from one day to next, you know, you could be working on a children's book, working on something about climate change, and all of a sudden, like, I'm looking up the stars, and I've got this like a big book again for DK, was based on the stars. So I came up with a lot of the rough ideas initially, and then the actual final. These are like some of the final spreads, and basically you would work with an editor on and somebody who specialises in, you know, kind of like astronomy, and I think the difficulty at the being a designer at this kind of level was, I think I was a bit more experienced at the time. Is like, we've got this spread, we want to talk about the size of stars and how do you explain that, and it was just, you know, like, the editor will have an idea. I want to show, you know, our sun, which is actually just compared to this, was like a dot here, in compared to one of the biggest kind of stars in the universe, which is called a red hypergiant, and it's probably going to be the size of this room compared to like a tiny little dot. And how do you show that information, you know, on a spread, like kind of like within the book, because all you're going to get is one dot. So it just shows you the scale of like the universe. So it's quite interesting. You're not just kind of like bogged down with kind of just thinking about typography. You know, thinking about a whole load of different elements, and it's always about learning. You're always learning something new, and I think that's one thing that's why I kind of like worked with them for quite a long time, because you're always learning something new, and it's all about education, and you're showing, you know, how to understand things that even I don't even understand, and making, like, you know, these books sell all around the world. Somebody in China is looking at this as well, translated into different languages. So there's loads of things to bear into mind. But when you look at, the actual what you're trying to say and how you say it within terms of design, these are just very simple blocks of color and type and a white background. So it's, I think the difficulty is it looks simple, but the amount of processes it goes through to get to that stage to make it look simple is actually very kind of like time consuming. So you could work like about 3 or 4 weeks just on one page, basically, or even like a month. But again, it was quite interesting because you're always learning something new and you're never kind of like bogged down with the actual kind of mundane kind of stuff to do with, this typeface here, like it just needs a little bit more kind of leading in there as well. So you have to bear that in mind as well. This is, again, this shows the actual kind of like stars again, and the actual constellation as well. And they wanted this glass kind of feeling to these illustrations as well. So a lot of it to commission the illustration as well. And again, working with editors who actually have a lot of knowledge. So these are some more spreads from the book. And then from that, I went on to working on a maths book, which was and this is with Cara Boardman. It's like something totally different. This is just how to be good at maths. And then, so you're working on some quite complicated stuff. Then you're just working on how to, a young child, how to show them how to read or how to learn about maths or learn a language. So you have to go from one extreme to the next, and just try and I'm going to stop here, and then kind of on that one book about astronomy, then you have to move on to create these quite fun kind of graphics, which are for a totally different audience. And then again, these are spreads. A lot of the so here you're doing all the design, all the illustration, all the rough layout, and it's quite it can be quite a time-consuming project. But you can see by the size of the book, we're talking about 300 pages. So it's quite like working on something you've been working on it for like a year and a half before you move on to the next book or the next project. So some more spread, and then something again totally different would be another book, which I haven't, so I don't have a copy of that one. But this is to do with the human body, and again, it's a part of a series, and this is all just illustrated kind of infographics. So you'd be doing again this is like adding some kind of color to what is quite an abstract kind of thing. What is DNA and how does it come from? So it's quite varied, the kind of work that you do within terms of working within a publishing industry. This was an idea that I came up with, and just created all the design about how does eating work, and it just shows you in quite simple kind of graphics. There's a brain wanting to eat, and it goes down, and basically you'll have a meeting with the art director and the editor would come up with this concept, and then you have to think about the layout, and then obviously the book is this kind of format, and say, well, actually it's not going to work about eating because it's just going to be on this one page. So then you have to sell the idea of maybe flipping a book around, which is many people don't do. So again, and again, it would be like a series of books as well, not just one specific title in the book. So this is about how to see my problems. Again, it's quite interesting. And then the reason why I chose this as part of the series as well, at the same time, this guy, he worked on a space book. So you just show somebody, or maybe you can work on this book as well, which is because he's got experience in working, within that kind of area. And this is again, simple graphics, but explaining quite complicated stuff about how the sun works, also in a visually kind of stunning kind of way, but also using typography and type and a lot of white space. There's a spread here, which is how do you explain stuff like nebulae and how does it work? And you always see the final product, within the book. You think, oh wow, it looks really simple and things, but what I first wanted to share with you was the initial kind of idea, and this is one of my kind of drawings before. So what happened was there's a stage before this, which is just an even rougher drawing than this, and it just I would sit down with the editor. He's got this idea of we're trying to create something that shows the mapping of the universe, but in a square. So they'd come up with this idea, and it's your job as a visual kind of designer and illustrator who can actually kind of visualize what they're trying to see. So this is this is the whole universe, but it's like a big square thing, and that's all they would say. So you have to go in and say, well, what is a big square thing? You have to work it out, how they draw it, how they lay it out. So this is, and basically I've got hundreds of these, like, the whole book is laid out like this beforehand, just drawn, with a pen and piece of paper, and then we'd kind of go in, take it into design, Photoshop, into Illustrator, and then this is the actual final one. So you can see from the initial kind of drawing, not much, the actual basic shape is there, but but there are certain things which are shifted over here. This was originally in my drawing was there, and then this was like, it was over there. So you can really see how it kind of, how things develop from your first drawing, which is going in and commission the illustrations, and basically, like, putting the whole spread together. And so going from one day to the next, after that, I just started illustrating more for children's. And this is the book Illustrator designed, and came up with some of the ideas as well. You see, it's just kind of like how to help the kids, and they wanted something quite bright, colourful. So it's a case of, again, drawing these out, and then kind of like creating all the illustrations. So this is a book I've done like all together. So there's a version of it here. So this is the actual book itself, and things with Andrew. So you might be helping. So you can see, like, again, it's quite a big book. It's about over hundreds of pages long, but also it's quite a lot to do within you do get a budget, you get a time frame, so you really have to kind of make sure you actually kind of like do what the brief says, but also what the what you're trying to like design, make it look interesting, make it look interactive, make it look colourful, and then again, it's quite different from those big books on space, from a lot of those interactive books. So it's quite, again, it's never boring. It's really interesting. So you end up just kind of learning about new things all the time. How to build snowman, snow penguin rather, and so it's just quite. This was actually a really good, fun project to work on as well. And then from that publishing place, I worked alongside Bear Grylls, who wanted to create a load of he wanted to do some children's books on this kind of survival skills. So they had to be, again, this was for the same publisher, but because I had experience of designing and creating and illustrating, we commissioned some illustrations to show, like survival skills, and like kind of like I started actually sourcing other illustrators who were based around the world, not just in the UK. So a lot of it now was to do with commissioning illustrators, commissioning and just kind of creating quite a lot of different books at the same time. So with this one here, with some, Bear Grylls, he wanted this idea, I want to like create this big series. He's got his TV series now. He wanted to like break out into book publishing, and there was quite a lot of, kind of hundreds of books actually that we worked on. Some of them are quite big, kind of like coffee table books like that. Some of them were smaller, kind of interactive, kind of like quite small things about survival. Actually, I'm just going to go through, and then activity books for children. I'm just going to like go through these quite quickly because there are quite a lot of them actually. So again, it was quite a big, bulky project. We worked on something for about 2-3 years on one specific kind of thing, and trying to get their idea of like, making survival kind of interesting for children as well at the same time. And then there were these smaller kind of like, they're almost like these little kind of handbook stuff was like, so that these small kind of like handbook kind of like stuff was like, sorry, I'm just going to get Andrew just like show them. So you like, basically there were about 30-40 of those, like about 10 of those big books. So within the space of 2 years, you're actually working on quite a lot of the same things. So in the end, I'd gone from illustrating the books myself to now just commissioning, like finding designers, finding illustrators to illustrate these books. So your job is now sourcing, like, who's the best person out there to actually do this work. And and also you build up a library of people that you use. So again, like there was a lot of books. And also, it just looks like a small, like, what you can see, again, it's quite simple and things, but all the planning, the processing of it, and also getting these printed as out, there's loads of things you have to keep in bear in mind. And these are some of the internal spreads from there. So again, this was for when I worked for a company called Bonnier, they're quite a big publishing house now. And from there, I ended up again working on quite a few different titles. So you get survival books, you get space books. You're working with like you got Bear Grylls. You're working with quite interesting people as well a lot of the time. And then I started working just purely on illustrated picture books. This is a big book on capitals, which I kind of helped out on. Somebody else like Source Illustrator, because there was, you're working on the Bear Grylls like 500 books at the same time, but you're also working on other books as well. So you have to be prepared to have a really varied task and be able to jump on to something totally different and a bit out of your comfort zone at the same time. And yeah, it's just like a really beautiful illustrated book. The illustrator was based in Brazil, and he just created these kind of like quite amazing illustrations, kind of do maps, and I think they're just really good fun, and making something quite bright, colourful, and it's, again, he's talking about a specific place, so all these have to be cartographically correct where these places are. So there's a lot to bear in mind, and who you're working with, like with the editor. So there's a lot of going back and forth. These are some of the other spreads from the book. Then this is a really big coffee table book about continental drift, and this is one I kind of like done basically all the rough ideas and all the design and a lot of the illustrations as well. So it's actually quite a large book. I couldn't fit into wouldn't fit into my suitcase actually, but this is all about maps and about cartography and what the world would have looked like, in terms of the actual land mass that it was. So and they wanted this old kind of like quite an old kind of like reference book feel to it. And these are some of the other internal spreads. But again, it goes through a process of design. You have to get this approved by a design manager, and also loads of other kind of people in between, a senior designer, and then like the publisher would have to approve these as well. But this is the kind of look and feel they wanted of this quite old historical school books. And this is some of the other spreads. And again, something totally different. You're just pulled in from one thing to the next. You're working on quite an old traditional books, and then I got another commission on the phone. DK said we're working on this big kind of English book, and you can illustrate and also design. So why can you be part of the team? And again, it was a big book on the on that. It was again a big 300-page book, which with these kind of big illustrations as well, but quite different from the book I'd been working on previously. Again, like it's a young kind of audience, and making text and typography work, and within the brief as well. So you get loads of kind of different elements to the book, and again, you're working as part of a team because it's such a big book as well, and there were these characters which I'd kind of like done some of the original kind of drawings too, and then again finding illustrators who can illustrate like this as well in a specific way. It all has to be in Illustrator or Photoshop. And then again, this is like this is the final piece, but then there were loads of different elements to them. But it was really good fun to work. I really enjoyed working. Some of these books are quite bright, quite colourful, and children's books, which is what I really wanted to get more into, more within the area of education and fiction. And the reason why I just put in this, which is one of the roughs from the book. Again, a lot of these things you see in the book are the final printed books, but a lot of the time you don't see the actual rough kind of ideas of the actual spreads. So I'd sit down again with the illustrator, kind of work out what's going to go where, how these are going to be laid out. We've got this idea of like, this was like a toy shop basically, or the toy window. All the toys were in the windows, and again, just like a rough drawing. And I think drawing is always like a good starting point, because you can just get all the ideas out, and instead of going straight into InDesign or Photoshop or Illustrator, you get you know what you're looking at basically, and then you can always change things. Where I think it's quite easy to get bogged down within just using InDesign. And then this was actually the actual spread. This is one version. Again, they changed it from the beginning, so you can really see like, so each one of these again would have their own drawing of the actual spread, and then how they're taken from the rough idea to the actual finished artwork. You can really see how the general progression kind of goes on. But I think drawing has always been what's kind of got me into publishing in the first place. So always try and instead of just going straight onto InDesign or Photoshop, really concentrate on how good design works. And this is what I'm doing kind of at the moment from one of my jobs now, actually working with Ladybird, a book publisher which I grew up with, I think I was explaining early on. So I'm working on creating, these are the famous, I'm sure you've seen the small kind of, still the small books actually. They create these small books which were kind of educated, kind of educational books. And these are the ones this is one of the first books I ever read actually, and it gave kind of those small kind of illustrated books. So they're redesigning these, and because I've got a bit of experience now working on big projects, I was just brought in to actually update and revamp these. So these are all the old titles. They were looking a bit dated. So my job now is to give these a new kind of a bit of fresh air, make them look a bit more modern, a bit more contemporary, and basically bring them up to date, really. So so you can see these are some of the ones I'm working on at the moment, changing the actual typography, commissioning a lot of the actual new illustrations for these. Again, working on the titles, you're working with designers outside, and you're working with a design agency as well, doing some of the work. You're working with kind of illustrators based around the world, from China to Brazil, Japan, Iceland. So it's a really kind of big project to actually fathom things. But again, it's quite a short amount of time, a year to a year and a half. So there's quite a lot of work and quite a lot of time to actually fit in. And these are some of the new kind of titles, illustrations. These are some of the older kind of illustrations as well. So we're revamping a lot of these styles. Got some of the new styles as well later on that I'll be able to share with some of the illustration students. But you can just give you an idea of the kind of internal pages. And as well as working on these titles, I'm also working with Penguin on the educational books. There's some educational books which are taken from basically the main Penguin books that you see in bookshelves, big fictional books, and they change these so they're accessible to schools and to younger children. So at the same time as working on all the Ladybird series, I'm also working on a lot of these titles as well, and creating a new look and simplifying them for education. So they're that it's a bit more kind of accessible to a younger audience rather than a big fictional book. And so these are a couple of the titles which I've just finished. Actually, these have just been printed. Actually, so this was for the Puffin Keeper and Wild City. So you're taking some original artwork from Puffin, from Penguin, and you're revamping it for a different audience to do with educational books. So these are a lot of the covers again. There's quite a lot of them. A lot of them you're actually commissioning out. You're finding illustrators. You're finding designers who can actually work, with to a specific brief. And these are some of the internal pages and how they look and the look and the feel of it. So they're quite simple. Text and image relationship is always in a white background. So I think you've so now I have this kind of experience of how to put a book together quite quickly. Sometimes it's actually more difficult to make them look simpler when you've been working on quite some of those big, complicated books for DK. And I think the last slide, I just wanted to go back. What I always do is what I just want to finish off with. Even though you see a lot of design, a lot of typography, the basis is I always have a sketchbook and I'm always going around drawing. And I think that's one of the main things which has actually kept my ideas kind of fresh and got me new commissions all the time, because I always like to draw and carry a sketchbook around. So you always just having a look around you, and this is when I'm on holiday, just to go outside and just draw people and just in an A4 sketchbook really, and then just draw people and characters, and sometimes it can just be anything really, a bit of typography, a bit of type that I like. But I think it's constantly it's always learning. I still think of as myself as a bit of a student, really. I'm just somebody who works for like, a lot of these kind of like publishing houses, but at the same time, what I just really like to do is just kind of like draw in my sketchbook. And this is some of them I've got to hear. So hopefully, sorry, I've just been like blabbering on for about an hour and just talking about this, but you do get kind of idea of what it's like working and how varied it is working in publishing. Thanks, Andy. Sorry.
We've got time for questions. Does anyone have any questions for Shahid? That's all.
No, everybody's interested in lunch also.
I'm quite interested in why you stepped away from drawing and illustration and went into kind of like design routes and typography and everything.
I think because I was always interested in type as well. I just wasn't very good at it, and that's why I think when I was at art college, I actually got the opportunity to actually experiment with type, and I just started off just not just like reading about type, like with letter set and things, but I just ended up just drawing it myself. So in the end, I actually learned quite a lot about typography, and now I think if I'd just been an illustrator, just illustrating at the time, I knew at a certain point, I wasn't going to be Quentin Blake. I was just going to be a jobbing illustrator, and I thought, if I'm going to just do illustrating, like either for children's books, I might also learn the whole process. So I've always enjoyed kind of learning more and also going further in what I want to actually develop my own skills as well. So it's always about learning new things, and you don't have to be caged in just, I just want to be drawing. I want to learn about typography, or learn about animation, or want to learn about filmmaking, or learn about new media. So it's just always about learning, really. Okay, thank you for the question.
Anybody else?
So we've seen that you've designed and you approached many scientific subjects, such as the sun, astronomy, and more. You spoke about working with an astronomer. When it comes to illustrating, for example, planets or things that are close to science, do you consult them? For example, do they guide you? Do you work close to specialists and experts?
So I think I heard that correctly. Is about talking about the actual subject I'm talking about in the book. You mean, do you work with consultants who know about, say kind of astronomy? Yeah, a lot of these, like, to be honest, a lot of these books, again, there's only a small amount. A lot of the time, working with quite specialized people. I think one of them, would be like professor from university. Also, you'll have a big celebrity name on there as well. So be working with people who know their subject in depth, and basically you're just somebody who doesn't know anything much about it really, and just learning from that as well. So you're working with people who are specialised in that subject. So they're the people who come up with the book idea about astronomy, about English, about maths. So it could be the book could be about anything. You just I think what makes it interesting is you're just not learning about one thing. When you're working on a new book, you're learning a new kind of subject yourself as well. So it's quite I think you have to work with somebody who knows their subject in depth. Yeah.
Thank you.
I think I've got a question that I think is going to be quite useful for the illustration students specifically. When you're looking to commission illustrators for a particular book, where do you look?
Yeah,
do they contact you, or do you search them out? And so what are the main kind of factors you are looking for in an illustrator?
I think the main thing is, again, it's not only interesting, sometimes we're looking for designers as well, because you have to package out the design of the whole thing. So again, I think the first point is you build up a kind of almost like a repository of people that you work with, you go out there, you meet people, and sometimes you might just meet somebody and you might be out at a party or something. Oh, I'm an illustrator. Oh, what kind of work do you do? I'm a designer. Oh, can I have a look at your work? And basically, just being sociable and meeting people, and you might sometimes. I was in an art gallery once, and somebody was doing this drawing, and they were really good at it. And I thought, do you get any work? I said, no, but I said, you could actually illustrate a good book. And so it's just a case of you don't need to be out there, but a lot of the time at the moment, because there's so many hundreds of books, I just have to have a look online. Especially with COVID, you don't get the opportunity to meet people, so you be out kind of just online really. And unfortunately, because it's more of a global kind of thing, it's got a lot more competition. You'll be dealing with somebody who's actually very good at the subject. So it might be somebody who are just commissioned based in China, and unfortunately English isn't their first language, but it doesn't really matter about language as long as they can draw really well and they can illustrate what you're trying to show. So it's a case of looking online. A lot of agencies look at who the commissioning agencies as well. There's loads of them out there and things. So it's a case of online, but also just meeting people and just saying, look, I want to illustrate. I want to design a book. Can I do it? And then so it's just a case of just being quite sociable and just being able to talk about your stuff and what you do, with a passion, and that hopefully comes across. So,
Anybody else?
yeah, there's one more.
So for one of your books, like your Bear Grylls series, like, do you know how many people would work on it? Like the writers, the design. Like, how big is the team for a book like that?
Yeah, like to be honest, like some of those books can be hundreds of people. I've actually worked on like much bigger ones, like 500-page big kind of like coffee table books, and it could be like hundreds basically from the commissioning illustrator to the writer to the people dealing with the printers. And remember, like they've got a long life as well. These books they get printed in China, but they get shipped around the world. So yeah, there could be hundreds of people. Like I might not know them all. The design manager might know them all. But at the moment now in my job, I'm actually kind of because I'm overseeing a lot of these. So it's hundreds of people, a lot of admin, a lot of kind of overseeing the people. Yeah, hundreds of people could be working on one book at a time. The writer, the salesperson, and they're all individual teams. So yeah, that's a really good question actually, because it's not just me. There's hundreds of people basically, but without the actual look and without that initial drawing, I'm really one of the key components because of the original kind of drawing that lays it out, and working with the editor. You wouldn't have that finished design book in the first place. But again, a good question, and there's hundreds of people, not just one person. You're always part of a team.
Thank you very much, Shahid.
That's great. And thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Take this thing off.